Hi again. Welcome back to Speaking Truth to Goodness, the podcast where we seek joy and purpose on a burning planet. Our conversations are informed by art and activism and a recognition of humans' deep need for connection and affirmation. The current series we are in, with guest host Michaela McCormick, begins in episode 1. This episode is a continuation of that conversation. Today we'll learn about two activists from the past whose work and lives directly influenced both Michaela and Jerry. They were Jimmy Boggs and Grace Lee Boggs, founders of NOR, the National Organization for an American Revolution. We discuss the risks of working across racial lines, but also the necessity of doing so. We also go deep with Michaela as she shares an experience from her past, a class struggle played out through fraternity life. If these stories and ideas connect for you, consider reaching out. We hope to feature listener stories in future episodes. Feel free to leave comments on Spotify, find us on Instagram, or email us directly at speakingtruthtogoodness@gmail.com. And with that, we'll jump back into the conversation. The thing about kids, though, is that to say, oh, I'm doing this to make a better world for my kids, it's not the whole picture, because I think everyone would want that. That's the thing. Everyone wants a better world for their kids. Mm-hmm. But I think the important piece here is we're not going to have a better world for my personal kids unless we make a world that's better for everybody's damn kids. Like, are you shitting me? Really? Like, yes, I could get my kid the best education money could buy right now or something, right? But if there's still kids in a system that's not serving them well and not preparing them to do what they need to do, my kids are still going to grow up in a world that's rough. Mm-hmm. That doesn't have this togetherness, where they're still fighting to have others have all the good privileges that they've had.
Right.
And so to stop at just buying the best for my own kids is some bullshit.
Yeah.
And that is what I get angry about.
I think you're a fierce mother.
Yeah,
exactly. You are a fierce mother.
Scream I mean, it's like, in there so much.
I think I would rather face a wild animal than you if I threatened your kids in any way. Fortunately, I just love your kids, so
they're fortunate for that too. Jerry.
It's not going to come up. And your kids are 12 and 14, amazing ages to be wild animals. They're so beautiful. I love them so much. They're so amazing.
So what you say, Patti, about, it's not just about making a better world for your kids, but for all kids, is more true now than it ever has been. And that's the truth that we have to help everyone see. Yeah. And because of how bad things are now, it's easier now than it has been before. Before this climate crisis, it was still easy for most people in this country, any developed country, to say, all I need to worry about is my family. That's my responsibility, and that's righteous. And they had a lot of support for taking that view. Yep. The whole system still supports that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I agree with you.
But it's less and less true now because of what's happening with the climate.
We seem in this country to be very slow to get the message. It's very slow.
Privilege provides very big blinders.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was this concept in a book I read. It was, This Book is Anti-Racist, I believe was the book. We did it for homeschool a couple years ago. But it talked about this idea of, our society has this central norm, right? Cis, het, white, 2.5 kids, picket fence, dog, home ownership, right? That's in the center.
Right.
And so then, like, as you find yourself in successive rings outside of that center, the people in those outer rings can see in toward the center, but those in the center have a much harder time seeing out.
Right.
And, so I think it's important for us in this work also to remember that those people can't see it. And it's by design, within our society, within how our hierarchical systems and institutions are set up. Neighborhood associations, all of those things play into this game of making sure the people in the center can't see out. Because I think if they could see it, a significant enough portion of them would feel more like we are discussing feeling right now. And maybe, if they're not made to feel afraid at losing their privilege, might do something about it. But there's an awful lot of games being played in the way media plays out to make people feel afraid of losing what they have if they try to extend a hand to someone else.
Patti, you talked about the change that began to happen for you when you moved from California to Wisconsin. Can you say something about, what I took from that, and maybe this is not accurate, that you started looking outward at that point at other people who didn't look like you. Is that right?
It's funny, but it might, maybe yes, but maybe for a different reason than we might think. Because in California, which I lived there, Silicon Valley area, till age 13. And that was where I lived in a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural spaces, while at the same time being raised in a doomsday cult with white supremacist origins. So there you go. It's a weird dichotomy. And so to me, it was almost more like, I think my ideals around who we all are as humans together living on planet Earth was probably formed in my early years in public school in San Jose in the 80s. And then I moved to Wisconsin. And even then, at age 13, I remember looking around and being like, oh, it is all white people here.
Yeah, exactly.
And it shocked me. And so maybe it did make me look outward at that point because I was used to the diversity of where I grew up and it made sense to me. I liked it. I was the kid that, since I was in Silicon Valley, we had people from all over the world were coming to work for IBM and develop things, right? So I got to go as a kid to my friend's house who was from Germany. I got to go to my friend's house who was from Japan because their parents were developers in the Silicon Valley at that time, brought in from around the world. And I thought that was the coolest fucking thing I could do. Like being at my Japanese friend's house and hearing her mom speak in full Japanese at her, getting to eat seaweed and rice cake things. I just thought, this is great. And I loved getting to learn about all the different ways that people live on planet Earth. I think I'd been so sheltered from it in the other parts of my life growing up. And so I didn't know it at the time, but I guess once I moved to Wisconsin, I kind of got known as a flower child. I only found this out later when I ran into somebody from high school. I didn't realize it, but I really think I must have brought my California, we're all like diverse ideas with me that came through somehow without me realizing it.
But at the same time, your family, you said, was part of a white supremacist cult.
Yeah, well, some qualifiers on that. The organization, the church, when it started, had some white supremacist like foundations to it. It was British Israelism. So it was this idea that God had transferred his designation of his chosen elect people from the Jews and had decided it would transfer over to white English speakers.
How convenient.
Right? Really worked out. So that was that was underpinning it in the 30s when it started. So I think by the 80s when I was a part of it, they'd kind of realized, oh, we'll get in trouble if we say that stuff. So that had been... and we did have a token black family in the church, so it had been hidden well enough.
Oh, okay. So that part of the cult's origins or beliefs was not explicit. People didn't express it. And so your experience with different kinds of people in San Jose was a stronger influence for you. Is that right?
I think so. And despite the fact that our church experience was very indoctrinating, from the time I couldn't even speak, I think just the fact that I spent more hours at school, thank goodness they sent me to public school, I spent more hours at school than I did in church, was my saving grace, so to speak. Yeah.
So here's a question that occurs to me. How did you find your voice?
I haven't yet.
Good point. But your mouth is moving and sound is coming out, and it's brilliant and inspirational.
How about I'm working on it?
How about it can grow, but it's already there? You have your voice, Patti. You are extremely articulate and unafraid to say what you believe. You have a voice. Can it grow larger? It can, always. But I listen to your voice, so if you don't have one, what the hell have I been doing?
All right. Thank you, Jerry.
But it's really, it's important to me. But I think the underlying important lesson is, you were in a cult, and that was very restrictive. But women's roles have also been very restrictive.
Oh, yes.
So the courage and the inherent brilliance, in my mind, how that finds its way up into the air is a really important question. We don't have to answer it right now, but I just want to acknowledge that one of the things that makes me love you, which I do, of course, is that you have come out of darkness into the light.
I agree with that.
And become fierce in terms of protecting your family, but also fierce in believing that there is no individual, we'll use a cult word, salvation. There's only a collective salvation. We're all saved or nobody's saved because it's going down.
Yes.
But I just want to honor how much your voice means to me.
Thanks, Jerry.
It's absolutely it's one of the most important voices in my life is your voice. Never mind.
Big. I received that. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to go back to anger.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because I'm picking up on something you said earlier, Patti, about how you learned in your family it wasn't okay to be angry.
Yeah.
And yet there are people in our society who it's always been okay to be angry, namely white men.
Oh, boy.
And I learned that while I was still identifying as a man for decades. I gave myself permission to be angry, to express anger, and I hurt people with it. So and the people, along with women, the other people who are most denied anger are black people.
Yes.
And black men in particular. Women, whatever their color, if they get angry, they're labeled with the B word.
Yeah.
Beautiful? No, not that word.
Black men, when they get angry, are often killed.
Yeah.
You're right.
I learned from a black man who was a mentor in my political work, Jimmy Boggs, who was the husband.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Who was the husband of Grace Lee Boggs, who many people are familiar with. The two of them founded something called the National Organization for an American Revolution in the early 70s, after they had been communists and labor organizers in the 30s and moved into the civil rights movement in the 40s and 50s. had worked with Malcolm X before he was assassinated. They realized by the late 60s, after the rebellions in the cities and the beginning demise of the black civil rights movement and the assertion by some blacks of black power, that they needed to figure out a way for black people to provide leadership to everybody else in the country. And they wrote a book called Revolution and Evolution in the 20th Century, which is seminal. And they formed this National Organization for American Revolution, which the acronym is NOR, initially with other black people, with the exception of Grace, who of course was Chinese American, but they were married. She and Jimmy were married. Jimmy was the son of a Alabama tenant farmer who migrated north and worked for a couple of decades in the Chrysler plant as an organizer. A line worker, one who was, helping make cars, but also working a union. He had a high school education. He was just looking for a job. But after he got the job, he saw he was a brilliant person with a high school education. But soon after he started working there, he realized that they needed to organize. And he wasn't the only one. This was in the 30s when there was a lot of union activity. Anyway, he and Grace formed NOR in the early 70s with this realization that black people needed to provide leadership. And after they had existed for, 2 to 4 years maybe, organizing among themselves, the black people from Philadelphia and Detroit, they started reaching out. And I was part of a queer, nonviolent political community in Ann Arbor that was part of something called the Movement for a New Society, which was a Quaker action group that came out of the anti-Vietnam War effort. We had become disillusioned with that, partly because it was all white. They had really good politics and strategies and nonviolent skills and, everything. But we started studying the writings of Grace and Jimmy, in addition to the book they wrote, Revolution in the 20th Century. And through a person who lived in our large communal household in Ann Arbor, who was going to meetings, NOR meetings in Detroit at the time, we got connected to Grace and Jimmy and their organization. And over a couple of years, they recruited us to be part of the organization. This was a risky thing for them to do, to reach out specifically to a group of white people, and particularly queer
white
people.
Yeah.
We ended up, our commune moved to Seattle and maintained a relationship with Grace and Jimmy and NOR. We were still part of their network. We organized a visit by them to Seattle where they were giving public speeches and talking about their ideas and inviting people to join the movement they were building. And I was a primary organizer of one of those public meetings. And one of my colleagues, local colleagues, was driving us home after the meeting. I was sitting in the back seat with Jimmy when they dropped me off at my house and they were going to take him to somebody else's house where he was staying. And before I could gather up my backpack and open the door, he said, Michael, that's what I was called then, Michael, you did good work tonight.
Can you do it?
He said, you did good work tonight. And I felt very touched, and I thanked him, and I looked at him, and he put his arm around me and leaned over and put his face in front of me and kissed me square on the lips. Not just a peck. He held my lips for a minute. He knew I was gay or bisexual. He wasn't. There was chasms of difference between us in that moment. But what I realized in that moment was that this person who was the victim, the survivor of the worst kind of oppression our country could offer, reached across that chasm and kissed me. He must have had depths of fear and anger that he had been dealing with for decades. But he didn't let that get in the way. He was
That's amazing.
tender and gentle.
That's an amazing
with me.
story.
And that was my first lesson in seeing how a political person could act on their pain and their tenderness simultaneously.
Wow, what an amazing story. I mean, I saw James and Grace a little bit too along the way in the 70s. They were extraordinary.
Yes.
But that's extraordinarily extraordinary. I mean, that's like... I always remember one of the things Jimmy said is not particularly earth-shaking, but he said, everybody needs shoes. Ain't nobody needs alligator shoes.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because it was Mountain Moving Cafe. Were you around during the Mountain Moving Cafe years? You would have loved that place because it was where the gay and straight communities actually came together, and it was extraordinary. And that's where they were speaking. But it's like you have to be comfortable in your skin to do what Jimmy did. So let's stipulate that he's comfortable in his skin. So he was, in the most loving way, chiding all these white liberal activists, to sort of get involved, do something. Don't just be cool about things, but not in a way that would make you feel humiliated.
Right.
It was much more inviting. And of course, Grace was educated, completely brilliant. And the last time I knew, I think she has died.
Yeah, she did a few years ago.
Yeah. But she was in New York, Detroit, doing all this community organizing around ecology and around
community gardens.
Climate. And she was in her 90s.
Yeah.
She was in her 90s.
Yeah.
And she was so compassionate and so articulate. So between the two of them, it was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And I touched just the edges of it.
Yeah. They were incredibly, him more than her, actually, incredibly warm and giving. They were both absolutely intimidating in terms of their intellect, and they were strident about their politics. And they expressed it sometimes in ways where you felt like you had to brace yourself against the wall in order to take it in.
Man, I love that.
Yeah, but at the same time, he in particular knew how to touch another person.
Yep. For the record, Michaela is touching me. It's such an important lesson, and they were so unique. There have not been a pair like them in my experience. But again, it's the ability to come from a strong enough core to kiss you, and from a strong enough core to make you want to back up against the wall. But it was, both those things were possible because of the integrity of the center. So, I mean, so that's an important lesson to me as I just hear this story. It's like, we all need to treasure our core enough to be able to take risks. And to do it in such a respectful way that they're probably not really risks at all. They may be risky, and sometimes it won't work. But I feel like I take a lot of risks coming up to you and saying, I really want to be connected to you. That wasn't much of a risk. You're not too scary. Do we want to take a break?
Sure.
Let's take a break. Okay. What a wonderful conversation we just had.
I love you too.
Yeah, I know.
Fun.
We are such an outstanding example of how people come together in a loving way on behalf of the world we want.
Mm-hmm.
Are we still recording? I hope so.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, never mind. This is not a break then, is it? You lying.
I'm not going to stop it. This is when the good shit happens.
That's really true. I'm going to go cough somewhere. I'll be back.
I'm going to stretch.
And I fucked up your pronoun first thing. Oh my God, that's wrong.
Yes. Well, you'll go to hell for that.
Yeah. Oh, there's a long list. So anyway, just what I was talking to Michaela about, my experience in Africa, living there 3 years, having one of my daughters born there, going to school there for a year, coming back in 1967, and of course my whole life changed because of that. But I don't know when you were in Nicaragua, but anytime you're dealing with life at that basic level and you're transformed by it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What impact did it have on you?
Oh, it just turned my life around. I grew up in a very conservative family in a mainstream Methodist church. I went to a conservative state university. I was a member of a fraternity. I was hell-bent on social climbing and looking good. And
Michaela, not you.
Oh, yeah.
Not you, Michaela.
Mm-hmm. You bet. And I went into the Peace Corps because my brother had gotten sent to Vietnam as a grunt. And me or no one else in my family wanted me to do that. So I thought, well, I'll go to the Peace Corps instead. But it was very self-centered thing for me to do. Yeah. I was just trying to survive.
I'm laughing because you didn't know what you were getting into.
Oh, I didn't. And I was so green. So, I mean, I had, certainly my politics were clearly more liberal than my fraternity brothers and most of the other people.
Fraternity brothers. Yeah. I'm sorry, I have to laugh. Michaela, the fraternity brother. Oh, yeah, right.
I wasn't just in it. I was.
That's wonderful.
I was integral to it. I became vice president after trying to become president.
What college?
Western Michigan University.
Where's that?
Kalamazoo.
Working class heartland.
Yeah. I mean, I paid $365 a year to go to school there.
Well, I paid $114 a year to go to UCLA, so there.
Yeah, California was.
But ROTC was compulsory, so.
Yeah.
Well, it's crazy, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Crazy. That's what's possible.
Crazy.
That's what existed. It's like the trolley systems that got ripped out so we could have cars. We had a transportation system in Portland that was extraordinary.
Uh-huh.
And in California, where I grew up, between LA and Long Beach, 25 cents for, a lot of that. So your fraternity, I love trying to put that together with the person that I know now. It's just too wacky. It's too crazy. I mean, I didn't have to travel as far because I never got into the system. In fraternities, I went to a sorority once and was terrified because I was very shy and I grew up very isolated. And I was just so uncomfortable because it was all about class.
Oh, yeah.
It was all about class.
You bet.
Oh.
I mean,
That's why I joined the fraternity, because I was trying to become middle class.
Wow.
Oh.
And I got to look the part. I made sure I looked the part.
So Lee, for those of you who don't know, my wife, who died a little over 2 years ago, was rush chair in a Jewish sorority, I forgot the name now, and tried to rush African American women into the sorority. And suddenly they no longer wanted her in the sorority. So she actually got run out of her sorority. Badge of honor, I suppose. How long were you in the fraternity?
From the time I entered my sophomore year until I graduated.
Wow.
Did you achieve what you wanted out of it? The social status that you wanted?
Yeah, pretty much. And the upside of it was that going into college, I was not self-confident. I was shy and reticent to speak up, except in class. I was always a good student. But something, I was so... I went to... my first years in high school, through my junior year, I went to a ghetto school. Half the people in the school were black, half were white. And the vast majority of white people were working class or lower, including me.
Yeah. Okay.
We moved, because we moved a lot. My family moved a lot when I was growing up. We moved to Kalamazoo for my dad to take a promotion. He got a promotion in a company he worked for, Pennsylvania Railroad. And I think it was very traumatic to move just before your senior year in high school. And they did the same thing to my brother earlier, a couple of years earlier. But I think a big part of my parents' decision was they knew there was a state university in Kalamazoo, and they thought, oh, we can't pay for him to go to college, but maybe if he's in the same town, he won't have to pay to live on campus. He can live at home, which is what I started out doing.
Right.
So I went to this high school in Kalamazoo that was just a year old. It had gotten a big spread in Look magazine. It was all upper middle class white kids. And I never made a friend there. I had always been good at making friends. I couldn't crack it in that school because I didn't have the clothes. I didn't have the money to spend on the weekends. I didn't have a car. And it was awful. It was just, I broke down crying more than once with my mother because I was so lonely. And it was such a new experience for me not to have friends. So I took from that a determination in college to get past that, to get past those class limitations. And fortunately, I went to a school that I could afford because I didn't have to live on campus, and it was full of a lot of other kids like me.
Yeah, I was going to say, there are a lot of places where you couldn't have been in a fraternity, they wouldn't have ever let you in.
Yeah. Well, this was the fraternity was mostly almost all middle class. There were a couple of other working class kids there, but it was mostly middle class, and I knew that. That was one reason I joined. I wanted to be in the middle class. I wanted to be cool, and I made that. I because the fraternity had. I hate to use the word good because it was such a rotten culture, but it was one of the top fraternities on campus, and that's another reason that I joined it, because I knew it was one of the top fraternities, and I wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And I made it. But after I got in, I became what they call the pledge trainer. Once a semester, we had a new pledge class, and somebody would take charge of the pledges, and I did that, and I tried to get rid of Hell Night. And I did get rid of it. One, the term that I was a pledge trainer, against immense opposition from my fraternity brothers. Immense. And because of that, later on, when I ran for president, they made sure I didn't get elected because they had a grudge against me.
Because you were going to not haze people?
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, very
Wow.
cool.
As a pledge.
A visionary, even in a repressive organization like a fraternity.
You're right. But on the other side of it, as a pledge, there's a tradition in fraternity culture, not just my campus, that the pledges would kidnap an active member and take him away somewhere and leave him. And I did that. I led a kidnapping of a fraternity brother who was gay. Now, he wasn't out. Huh?
Was that part of it?
No, he wasn't out. He wasn't out. But it was sort of like an open secret.
At least, well, yeah.
Because of how he behaved, how he conducted himself, and he never had a girlfriend, and he was a limp wrist guy. But we didn't ever acknowledge that, and I didn't to myself, because it would have meant that I had to face the same thing in me, and I was years away from doing that.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Oh, Michaela.
So we kidnapped him, and we left him out on a country road in northern Indiana, which meant we crossed a state line with him.
It's a felony. It's a fucking felony, man.
Yeah.
You're in jail. No?
We left him on a snow-covered country road with a dime in his pocket to make, if he could find a payphone and make a call, with Spanish military handcuffs on his wrists. When we had pushed him into my car, when we took him on campus before we drove to Indiana, he bumped his head on the roof when we pushed him in, and he started bleeding. And we wrapped a towel around his head to take care of the blood. And on the way south, we stopped at a gas station, and we thought, well, we don't want them to see somebody bleeding in the back seat of my car, so we pushed him down to the floor. Yeah. I mean, it was mean stuff. And I came out of that feeling pretty cocky about myself.
You said feeling pretty cocky.
Cocky.
Yeah, okay.
And his two best friends in the fraternity, who were two very powerful guys in the fraternity, called me into their room a couple of nights after he got home and tried to scare me, and I wasn't taking it. I was really proud of myself. I just sat there stoically sort of smiling at myself inside and let them read the riot act to me, and then walked out. And I thought, well, that's it. Well, that was another reason that they prevented me from becoming president. And so that's material that I have had to do emotional work around for a long time.
You mean to process your
To process it,
participation in that?
yeah, through peer counseling and meditation.
Oh, wow. Did the person you kidnapped, did he think it was fun and games?
Oh no,
No.
no,
So
oh
it
no.
felt like
He was
a real
scared. He was
kidnapping.
clearly scared when we were doing it to him.
That's just amazing. I mean, I would have voted for you.
Even knowing that?
No. Yes. If you wanted to put a stop to what you did,
I wanted to put a stop to things like that, yeah, which is why I got
would
rid
have
of
voted for you.
Hell Night, yeah.
I'm still voting for you.
Every semester we did Hell Night, and every semester at least one pledge went to the hospital.
Oh, I don't think that stuff happens anymore.
Oh, yes, it does.
Does it?
Yes, it does.
I guess it's the
Yes,
things we
it
don't
does.
hear about, huh?
Where did you go to school?
UW Stevens Point, Wisconsin.
So, where is Stevens Point?
Right in the center of the state.
Of what?
Right in the center of the state.
Oh, okay.
It was not like that. I guess I was not involved in fraternities and sororities, so I don't know. But I get the sense that there's been a cultural shift around it, but I guess I don't know for certain. Where I feel like, in general, those types of hazing rituals and things have been, if not expunged, at least looked at as
What do you
not
think?
okay.
They have been looked at, and there are some places where it doesn't happen, but it still happens on plenty of campuses.
That's fair. I want to be mindful of our time here. We did a great job. I treasure having learned the things I've learned about what brought you to here, Michaela. Thank you for sharing so much. Your hard moments and your joyful moments, too.
Thanks.
And we'll leave it there for now. Thank you for joining us. Come back for the next episode where we take this conversation and attempt to give it a treasure map to follow from here. As you may realize, that's the hard stuff. If, and that's a big if, we as humans can agree on our shared goals, we seem to struggle in the planning of how to get there. We make our best attempt. Next episode. I'm Patti Robron, and my co-hosts have been Michaela McCormick and Jerry Atkin. Until next time, keep speaking truth to goodness, because goodness is all around.